Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I am going to discuss the theory of structural change. So this is the theory of economic development. So according to many economists, so if we consider the structural theory of development, so according to many economists, the economic development, it is a process. What process? The process of transformation of an economy. The process of transformation, so through which an economy shifts its dependence from agriculture to industry. That means an agriculture based economy or primary activities based economy that is gradually transferred towards an industrialized nation. So in this case, what we study, we'll study that one famous model. But before we go to the model, just we have to learn one thing, that means the dependence from agriculture to industry, that mainly takes place through the neoclassical theory of price mechanism and the resource allocation. Better to say the reallocation of the resources. So we will start with Lewis model. Lewis model is basically a two-sector model. It is based on also economic dualism. So basically, whenever we discuss the Lewis model, we shall consider a model, a country with dual economic dualism. So there are some assumptions of Lewis model. So first assumption is that it is a dualistic economy. In dualistic economy, we have two sectors and they have their respective features. So one is the traditional agricultural sector, or it is the rural sector. So we can say this is rural. So there are some features. First thing is that in rural sector we find the subsistence based farming or the consumption based agriculture. So the production is guided by the objective of self consumption. So we can say this is the subsistence type activity, in which we also find the engagement of the family workers, family members. And we have an urban sector, so better to say a modern urban sector. So modern urban sector that is mainly based on the industry. So here one thing I should mention, if we consider the modernized commercialized agriculture, so that should also fall in this category, modern sector. And here the main objective is to maximize profit or maximize the surplus. So we can say that this modern industry is basically, this activity is market based activity. So this is the first assumption. So rural area, one more thing I have to say, whenever we consider that the rural area that is based on the subsistence farming, so there is the existence of surplus labor. That means in the language of economics, microeconomics, whenever we see that the marginal productivity of labor becomes zero. So in this case, what we see, in this case, wage is not determined by the marginal productivity of labor. Rather here, wage is determined by the average productivity of labor, that we equal share basis. So this is the first assumption, and now we'll consider the second assumption. The second assumption is that urban wage is always greater than rural wage. So why should people go to the urban sector whenever they are working in the rural sector. So definitely there should be higher wage should work as an incentive to move from the rural sector to the urban sector. And here, one as there is huge huge surplus labor in the economy, then in urban sector the labor supply will always be perfectly elastic. So labor supply curve in the urban sector will be represented by a horizontal straight line. So in urban area we can say that this is the labor supply curve. So whenever labor demand rises, urban sector can absorb more labor without increasing the wage rate. But this urban wage is always greater than the rural wage. This is the most important thing here. Now, third assumption is that the economy should be a closed economy. So we are not considering here an open economy or any chance of international purchase or sale. The third thing is that this is a closed economy and volume of trade is zero. So we will not bother about the traded goods. The fourth assumption, number 4, that is markets. Here the markets are subject to perfect competition. So measuring perfect competition is nothing. This implies that the urban sector labor demand will be determined by the marginal productivity of it, or we can say that the downward sloping marginal productivity of labor curve will be the labor demand curve here. We'll coming to this point later. Next assumption is that we'll consider here the labor is the only variable factor of production. Only variable factor of production. So in both agriculture and industry. So here what we find that in agriculture the amount of land is constant, and in industry the amount of capital is constant. But the amount of capital will not remain constant, but if we consider one time period, amount of capital constant. So whenever we see that there is the surplus which is reinvested in industry, then what will happen? There will be more capital, and that will cause a shift in the that will cause an increase in the marginal productivity of labor. We'll also discuss this in details whenever I'll be explaining it graphically. And 6, now this is also crucial assumption, that these production functions are subject to the law of diminishing returns to a factor. So we can say that whenever in agriculture or industry, wherever it is, whenever employment of labor increases, the marginal productivity of labor will decline. So on the basis of these assumptions, now we will discuss I'll explain it graphically. So let me explain it graphically. So figure 1A and 1B represents the industrial sector, and figure 2A and 2B represents the agriculture. These are figure 2A and 2B represent the agricultural sector, and these two figures represent the industrial sector. So this is our agricultural productivity, and here it reaches the maximum. So we can say that this is our YA max. So if we draw here what we see, this is the marginal product. I said about the case of disguised unemployment because of the subsistence agriculture. There is the existence of surplus labor in agriculture. So that's why this is the MPL curve. And this is the average productivity of labor curve. So what we find here, this is the WA is the in the urban wage, sorry, agricultural wage. Now, industrial wage will be definitely more than the agricultural wage. So we consider this W bar is fixed. And this straight line is the labor supply curve. That means perfectly elastic labor supply curve in the industrial sector. And so initially we consider that this is the industrial production function. So this is YM. M stands for the manufacturing sector. And here we see that this is the labor demand curve in which we can write that P multiplied by MPL in manufacturing sector. So from microeconomic theory, so in vertical axis we are measuring MPL. So in microeconomic theory what we find, this is the surplus of the industrialists, or this is the surplus of the capital owner. So what will they do? They will simply reinvest it. So whenever the extra capital is reinvested, that means the productivity will increase. So this is our YM1. We have to remember one thing, that whenever we consider YM or YM1, the amount of capital applied is fixed. This is very crucial point. So as the productivity increases, what we see, first time agriculture industrial employment was LM1. Now whenever we will find, there will be a rightward shift of the labor demand. So the demand for labor will increase because the marginal productivity of labor increases because of employment of more amount of capital. So if we see, again we see that the producer surplus will also increase, profit will increase, so there will be further increase in production. So as there is further increase, YM2 is the new production function with higher dose of capital, so definitely there will be more demand for labor. So in this way what we see, gradually we find that the employment will increase in the industrial sector. And the question is, who will supply the labor? Definitely this is supplied by the, actually this extra labor required in the industrial sector will come from the agricultural sector. So the surplus agricultural sector already has surplus workers, and according to Lewis, their surplus worker in agriculture is counted in millions, wherever more labor required in the industrial sector is counted in 100 or 1000. So agriculture industrial sector will increase and agricultural sector will not shrink. So this is some kind of what we can call it a Pareto improvement in the economy. So this is the way Lewis model explains that how does the industrial sector expands, and the secret is that, or the keyword is that, there is huge amount of surplus labor in the agricultural sector. So whenever these workers are shifted from agriculture to industry, industrial sector will expand, but agricultural sector will not contract. So on the economy will gradually change its dependence. So what we see, the share of GDP, the share of industry in GDP will increase. According to the occupational structure will change because there will be more dependence, more people will be employed in the industrial sector, and the volume of surplus labor in agriculture will gradually diminish. So up to this point, this is the explanation of Lewis model. But Lewis model is also not free from criticism. So there are several critics who try to point out some loopholes, especially in the assumptions that were made by Lewis. So let's find out the criticisms of Lewis model. So actually, uh, what we find that the economists, many economists, they considered they mainly criticized the assumptions made by the Lewis. So according to many economists, so criticism, the assumptions made by Lewis, they are considered to be misfit to the institutional and economic perspectives or institutional and economic realities of the developing countries. Okay, so first one is institutional plus economic realities. So what are those? So first thing is that it is said that whenever there is more profit in the urban area, more capital is employed in the urban area, so it will cause a growth in the employment of labor in the urban area. Now, so what we say that according to Lewis, whenever the profit of the manufacturing sector rises, so Lewis says the profit of the manufacturing sector rises, so that will definitely increase the volume of capital in the manufacturing sector. So what we see, the labor demand will rise, and according to Lewis, the delta Km, that should be greater than delta LD. That means demand for labor will increase more than the employment, more than the new investment. But Lewis here ignored one possibility, that whenever the industrial sector is making huge amount of profit, so they can go for research and development, and they can innovate or invent the better technology, better labor saving technology. So in that situation, what will happen if they use the labor saving technology? So definitely what will happen? There will be more surplus will be generated. So question is that if we consider that initially this is the labor demand curve. So whenever there is the shift in technology, the productivity of labor rises, but there is no actual impact on the demand for labor. This is quite natural. So what we see here, the productivity of labor increases, there is increase in the total amount of total capital formation, total production, but labor employment will remain unchanged. So this is a major loophole of Lewis theory from the perspective of the developing countries, or also for the developed countries. This is one loophole. Second loophole is that what is the guarantee? So here what we see, that whenever the profit of the manufacturing sector increases, they invest, the investors or the entrepreneurs, they invest more on the manufacturing sector. But what is the justification of that? What is the certainty that all the profits will be reinvested in the industrial sector? What is the certain? Can anybody say that can anybody guarantee that the domestic investors will not invest their profits abroad, or they will not deposit the money in the international banks? So if that is so, then increase in the profit level will not cause any further investment in the industrial sector, and consequently there will be no increase in the employment opportunity. third problem is third criticism regarding that the Lewis says that W in the urban sector, W will remain fixed in the urban sector. But in many developing countries, specifically before the period of economic reforms, the developing countries, we found that the wage rates were increasing. Even at the advent of high level of unemployment in industrial sector, there was continuous rise in the wage rate. That could be due to the labor laws of the country, the minimum wage law, or could be due to the bargaining power of the labor union. But in the developing countries, if we can empirically find that the wage rate was increasing in the developing countries. So this is another loophole of Lewis model. So whenever the demand for labor rises, but simultaneously there is an increase in the wage rate, then then the effect of profit in the industrial sector will not have that much good effect on the industrial employment. That is another possibility. And fourth is that Lewis here mentioned about the operation of the law of diminishing returns. But with the improvement in technology, there can be constant returns or there can be increasing returns. So this is another loophole of Lewis theory. However, despite all these loopholes and criticisms, Lewis theory was to some extent successful, and it was the first successful theory to explain the structural change from the perspective of a dualistic economy. So this is definitely Lewis theory, or his work can demand some credit. So because it explains the dualistic and how does a developing economy moves in the path of development, or underdeveloped economy can move in the path of development. So that is definitely the success story of Lewis theory. So that's all about Lewis theory. So we end here, and if you like it, if you find it's good for you, then please do like, share and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I'll be back soon with a new video.